Welcome to Real Estate 360, an informative and engaging hour discussing everything you need to know about the world of real estate. Your host, Tom K. Wilson, will provide you with insight and guidance on how to buy, sell, finance, and invest in real estate. He also offers real estate tax management strategies, new construction advice, home improvement tips, and much, much more. Now, here's your host for Real Estate 360, Tom K. Wilson.
Well, good afternoon. Welcome to the Real Estate 360 program today, your number one source for all your real estate needs here in the Bay Area, where we provide you with the information you need to make the best fact-based decisions. No emotion in there. That's never works as well as fact-based. By popular demand, Real Estate 360, in case you don't know, has grown from a once-a-week program to a Monday through Friday program, which airs here on KDOW at 3 o'clock every day. And, of course, you can always go to the links to look at past programs. I'm Tom Wilson, your new host for the Wednesday edition of Real Estate 360. Each day we have a different host with different areas of specialty, so you can get well-rounded background of different aspects of real estate investing and real estate in general. It's an honor to be a part of Radio KDOW and the Real Estate 360 team. Got a great program for you today. We'll talk about some new things that are going on in the marketplace and what they may mean to you. We also have a guest today, Nancy Chillag, who's a associate and friend of mine who I've known for a while. We're both affiliates of SJREI Association, the San Jose Real Estate Investment Association. And Nancy is uniquely experienced in many broad aspects of real estate that is pretty hard to find. Nancy is not only is she an attorney and specializes in real estate, she also is a CPA, she's a real estate broker, and she's an investor. It's pretty hard to get that combination, so I know you want to hear what Nancy has to say, and we'll bring her on here in just a few minutes. I want to talk a little bit about how the election and continuing federal government influences may affect you from a real estate standpoint. The first thing I want to mention is that it looks like, from what we're reading and hearing from the administration and feds, that the real estate refinancing is going to continue. We're going to have continued positive government influence on allowing borrowers to refinance. It doesn't look like we're going to get a more assistance for those with distressed loans. Hopefully they've recognized that they've done enough stimulation there and bailouts there, so there's no word about that. But it also looks like that the feds are going to keep the interest rates low. We're hearing projected numbers into 2015. So, I always believe in starting on your path of real estate investing as soon as you can, or to continue it. But I don't think you need to consider it to be a panic. It isn't something that's going to be going away overnight. So make your decisions very carefully for your real estate investing. We've got some new mortgage standards coming along in January. The Dodd-Frank Act is going to go into effect and as soon as we get into January. And they will define which mortgages are judged to be beyond a borrower's ability to repay. And when that happens, it's certainly anticipated that they may trigger some legal and financial implications for lenders, and maybe that's something that we can get Nancy to touch on for us when we bring her on in a couple of minutes. Lastly, the mortgage interest deductions look like they're going to live to fight another day. There was certainly a lot of talk about real estate and interest deductions being something that was going to be reduced for everyone. But when the administration took a look at what states were voting for Obama, they noticed that the 10 states that will benefit the most from mortgage interest deductions all voted for Obama. So lo and behold, looks like they're not going to reduce the interest rate deductions for those two sectors, but you guessed it, for the higher end ones, they're probably still going to cap the interest rates. Today, it's the amount of interest that you can deduct. Right now, it is running $1.1 million. $1 million of that is for the primary and secondary homes, another $100,000 for beyond that to use as you want. But we don't know what they're going to do, what's it going to get reduced to. So keep tuning into this program and keep your eyes on the press. We'll see how that's going to affect us, and possibly we'll hear some things that may influence you to make some decisions this year, or at least affect your planning. By the way, speaking of planning, on our next program, we're going to talk about how to write a business plan and how to plan your business, which I think for this time of year is a great thing to start thinking about. Turns out that most people who are self-employed or have their own business or even have their own investment portfolio, which really should be considered a business, do not have a business plan. And if you have a plan in place, you'll have a lot better chance of reaching a goal than if you don't. So we're going to spend the whole program talking about that, so don't miss that sector. We want to introduce Nancy and bring her in here. And Nancy, Nancy is a CPA. She's an attorney who does a lot of business in the real estate arena. She's a real estate broker. Her husband even is a general contractor, and she's an investor herself. So it's great to have Nancy. And again, I've had an affiliation with Nancy for a few years, and we've both been affiliated with the same investment club. And I've enjoyed my interface and time with Nancy. Nancy, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Nice to have you. Nancy, just if you will, let the listeners know a little bit about your practice and what your specialties are, and how you can help them before we get started into some questions.
Sure. Chillag & Associates is my law firm. I founded it back in 1989, and primarily our focus is business, real estate, and estate planning. We basically protect families, businesses, and assets. We're located in Menlo Park, and have a great staff that our clients just love, and we try to make things as easy as possible for people to get their legal work done.
Great, Nancy, and you're in Menlo Park, right?
Correct.
Okay, and we'll give you, toward the end of the program, we'll give you Nancy's contact information in case you have some more questions for her. Nancy, do you have any thoughts that you can share with our listeners about what aspects of changes to real estate law might affect them, Dodd-Frank Act, or anything else that you think people should be aware of and plan for?
There are some things that they can be doing to put real estate into, or I should say, get real estate out of their estate, and preserve taxes. At the end of this year, the $5 million gift exemption is going to go away, and our lifetime exemption will be $1 million next year. So there's a short window of opportunity that people can take advantage of by gifting $5 million of assets out of their estate. And real estate is incredibly valuable in doing that, because in doing gifting of real estate, depending on how you set it up, you can get discounted values and actually give away a lot more than $5 million to get it out of your estate. By getting that out of your estate, you get all the future appreciation of the real estate out of your estate. But more importantly, you avoid 55% estate taxes on whatever you've gotten out of your estate. So it is a huge benefit, and we're working with a lot of clients to meet that December 31 deadline.
What do you think from what you're reading in the press and here? What do you think the likelihood is that they're going to revise it so it does not drop all the way down to $1 million, maybe something in between?
It's hard to say. If I were to guess, I would say they would probably change things to be $3.5 million. However, that's going to be an estate tax exemption. And the talk is that the most you're going to be able to gift during your lifetime is $1 million. So that really limits the amount of planning that you can do, where right now you can gift $5 million. And that's huge. That's an extra $4 million out of your estate that probably won't be available after the end of this year.
So you must be pretty busy right now.
Yeah, I would say that.
Before we get into, we're going to talk quite a bit on the program today about how to protect your real estate and entities and the pros and cons of different ones. But before we get into that, Nancy, do you, if indeed the Dodd-Frank Act comes in effect and they are pretty borrower friendly on deciding which mortgages are judged to be beyond a borrower's ability to repay, would you guess that's going to trigger a fair amount of legal and financial implications for lenders?
It's really hard to say. Things are just in such a flux that it's hard to say what's going to happen.
It's so hard to predict. Our Nancy and I have had the pleasure of meeting the chief economist of Fannie Mae, Dr. Doug Duncan, and spent some time with him. And I'm always amused when I've asked him, Dr. Doug, where are things headed? And he says, well, my first advice is if anybody tells you that they know how this is going to play out, he says, run like heck. And he says that if it's pretty much like a doctor prescribing 27 pills to a patient, and the patient wants to know what the prognosis is, and the doctor has to say, we've never modeled this before, we've never given 27 pills to a patient before. We have no way of telling how this is going to go. So he says, my best guess is it's going to take a long time to play out, but exactly how it's going to go, we don't know with all this amount of intervention that's going on.
And what happens a lot is that the people that get caught up in it early are the ones that suffer, and then there are lessons learned and changes made, but it's too late to help the people that got caught up in it.
Mm-hmm. And indeed. And you have to be careful what you hear with folks at the top. There's so many people. There's so much that people hear from people that they think they respect, and they're from a perspective of authority, and they and yet some of those things don't play out at all. So we're going to take a break here for just a couple of minutes, but don't go away. We have Nancy with us for a while, and we're going to get into the details of what kinds of entities are the best ones to consider for protecting your entities. We'll be right back.
For more information on today's program, visit RE360Radio.com. That's RE360Radio.com. For more information on today's program, visit RE360Radio.com. That's RE360Radio.com. Now, here's your host for Real Estate 360, Tom K. Wilson.
All right, welcome back. We have with us today Nancy Chillag, who's an attorney and CPA and real estate broker, and probably most importantly, maybe an investor. And welcome back, Nancy.
Thank you.
And let's start talking about what people should know and considering protecting their real estate assets that they have. I've certainly thought about this a lot over time, and over the course of 37 years I've been investing, and especially the last 13 when I've got into some larger projects, I've had a lot of entities, and I've noticed it's LPs and LLCs and general partnerships and so forth. And I've noticed that it's really a difficult thing for people to assess, because there's lots of different pros and cons, and of different ones. So I think a lot of people wind up doing nothing because they're confused, and hopefully you can help take some of that confusion out for them.
I can try.
Indeed, my perspective has been that in order for an entity to do you any good, and you correct me if you have a different perspective, Nancy, but you have to have a problem. You have to have a problem that can't be solved. You have to be sued. You have to lose, and it has to be something that your liability insurance doesn't cover. So you have to go through all those gates usually before an entity does you much good, although admittedly there's probably some psychological advantage if someone knows your assets or real estate, in this case, is in an entity. They might be less likely to consider coming after you. But having said that, every day there are lots of folks that come after others and try to get their real estate, and whether it's legitimate or not. So talk a little bit about what the risks are, Nancy, with not having your real estate assets sitting in an entity.
Okay, and you're right. You do have to sort of go through all those gates, with one exception, that a lot of times an entity can give you anonymity. So as a lawyer, a client comes into my office and, they've got a claim. The first thing I do is say, can we collect if we win? And we'll do an asset search, and we'll search by the defendant's name. Well, what comes up? Anything in that defendant's name, and now I know that I have a bucket to collect from. But the entities don't necessarily come up. And so you might discourage lawyers right from the beginning from even taking a case against you if they don't think you have any assets. So I just sort of wanted to add that at the beginning because that's an overriding benefit of using an entity. But you're right, you have to assess the risks. And, there are a lot of risks depending upon, what you're doing as an investor. If you're holding property for long-term rent, you think of slip and fall, you think of fire, and all of those things can be covered by insurance. But a lot of times you've got tenants that can sue you for things that are not covered by insurance. And if they're successful, not only can they get the property that they're living in to satisfy their judgment, but they can get everything else you own. Now, if you're doing flips, you may not have tenants in your investment property. However, you may be doing major renovations. And if something goes wrong with those renovations down the road, then the buyer of that property is going to sue you for defective construction. Because developers, which is what you would be if you're handling the rehab and sale of the property, are going to be liable for those defects. And if you don't have a construction general liability policy, you're going to be on the hook. And you're not going to, not only are you not going to have a policy to pay the defects, but you're not going to have a policy to pay the attorney fees. And a lot of times those attorney fees can be a lot higher than the damages would actually be. So it really depends on what you're doing with your properties in order to be able to analyze the type of risk that you have. Indeed.
And of course, I'm sure most people always feel like it's somebody else that's going to get the problem, and since they haven't so far, they maybe can keep on going without that risk materializing. But that can be that can really be something that, in hindsight, you can say was a big mistake.
It's a business decision.
Sure.
You have to know what the risk is. Most people just assume that all risks are covered by insurance. And so they never ask the next question about whether they need an entity because they figure they don't because they've got insurance coverage. Or what they'll do is they'll have insurance and they'll go out and get a liability or a, umbrella policy. Well, what they don't understand is that an umbrella policy doesn't cover what's not covered by the underlying policy. It only covers what's covered by the underlying policy.
So we're going to come back in just one moment here and continue on that subject.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to take another break here for just a moment, and we'll be back with Nancy to continue the subject of real estate protection, and we'll stay tuned. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes.
For more information on today's program, visit RE360Radio.com. That's RE360Radio.com. For more information on today's program, visit RE360Radio.com. That's RE360Radio.com. Now, here's your host for Real Estate 360, Tom K. Wilson.
Welcome back, and we have with us today Nancy Chillag, who is a real estate and estate planning attorney, and also an experienced investor. I always feel like it's when I get people lined up for my team of investing, one of the most important things that I look for are folks that not only have the education for it, but they also are personally knowledgeable from experience in that very area. So when I get attorneys and insurance folks and title and brokers and so forth, I'm always looking for those who are also experienced investors or work exclusively with investors, because that makes a big difference. Okay, Nancy, you were before we took the break there, you were talking about the pros and cons of umbrella insurance and what people's assumption is about what that covers. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, it's just a matter of understanding what's covered by insurance and what's not. And you could probably interview a real estate or insurance expert and get more information on this. But if your underlying insurance policy doesn't cover something, your umbrella doesn't cover it either. And most people don't realize that. And so when you figure out that insurance doesn't cover all of your risks, then the use of entities or other asset protection devices are necessary, to fully protect you. And that's where we come into, looking at various entities that can be used for that protection.
Okay. Let's talk about different tools to protect. And I guess my guess is that most listeners are probably either have long-term holds or they have they're flipping products if they're in the real estate arena. And then I'm sure we have some other listeners who in the commercial arena. But let's why don't you just go over the different kinds of entities that can offer protection and what some of the pros and cons are for their different uses.
Sure. Probably the entity most people are familiar with and has been around forever are corporations. You've got your IBMs and your Intels, and, those are all corporations. Well, little individuals can have their own corporations. As a general rule, if you have long-term hold real estate, you're not going to put it into a corporation. There are tax consequences to that when you try to take the real estate out of the corporation. And so as a general rule, if you have long-term holds, we're not going to be using a corporation. Now, if you have a flipping business, then you don't have the same tax consequences, and a corporation might work for you. But it's really necessary to have somebody analyze your particular situation to figure out whether a corporation would be good or bad.
And when you say corporation, are you referring to both C and S Corp?
I'm referring to both C and S Corp. And we could spend a whole show on, what the difference between those are, but generally an S Corp will flow the income of the corporation through to the shareholders who pay the tax on their individual return. And a C Corp, the corporation reports its profit and pays its tax.
So for long-term holds, you would generally say corporation for most people is probably not the best way.
It is not the best way. So the alternative to that is the LLC, which is a limited liability company, and that's probably the most popular vehicle to obtain asset protection for real estate holdings. And the nice thing about LLCs is that they give you a lot of flexibility. So if you are, putting in money with a partner, you may be putting in equal money, but you may be sharing profits differently. And the LLC gives you that flexibility.
Okay, we're going to take another break, and when we come back, we'll continue with Nancy and talking about the pros and cons of LLCs and corporations for different asset protections. We'll be right back.
For more information on today's program, visit RE360Radio.com. That's RE360Radio.com. For more information on today's program, visit RE360Radio.com. That's RE360Radio.com. Now, here's your host for Real Estate 360, Tom K. Wilson.
Oh, welcome back, and we're talking with Nancy Chillag, founder of Chillag & Associates in Menlo Park. And Nancy is a very experienced attorney for both real estate and estate planning, CPA and real estate broker and investor. So her input is, I think, very valuable since she's got such a broad experience base. Nancy, you're talking about limited liability corporations, and let's continue with that subject.
Sure. As I was saying, the limited liability companies are the probably the number one vehicle that's used for asset protection with real estate.
And why is that, Nancy?
Because of the flexibility it gives you between having your investment and your profit sharing be different, which you can't do in a corporation. It doesn't give you the same tax liabilities that a corporation does when you try to take real estate out. And as I mentioned at the beginning, you've got anonymity, at least from an initial standpoint by holding your investments in an entity.
Now, talk for a moment, if you will, about single-member entities. I've certainly heard at times that in some states or most states that if it's just for an individual or themselves and their spouse, that there may be some limitations to an LLC's protection. Can you talk to that some?
Sure, and it depends on where you're located. So there are some states that, regardless of whether you are a single-person LLC or a multiple-person LLC, you have protection so that creditors cannot reach the assets that are inside the LLC. Some states, like California, take the position that if you're a single-member LLC, they may allow the creditor to pierce that veil and get at the underlying assets. There are certain things you can do to try to prevent that. And, it hasn't really been tested in court yet.
What are your thoughts about setting up some entities in other states?
Well, one of the tools that, attorneys use is setting up an LLC in a state that does not allow the veil to be pierced, and then registering that entity in California so that it can hold property here. The question is whether that will work in preventing a creditor from getting at the underlying asset, and we just don't know that yet.
What about limited partnerships?
Limited partnerships are good. They have some advantages to them in that, at least in California, limited liability companies have an additional gross income tax, which limited partnerships do not have. So there's that advantage. The downside to a limited partnership is that while the limited partners have limited liabilities, the general partners do not. And limited partnerships are usually used for family gifting, where you're really not trying to do asset protection per se. You're trying to do estate planning, where you want to transfer interests in property to your kids but not give them any control. So the parents remain in control as the general partners, and the kids have limited partnership interests, and you accomplish your estate planning goals over a period of time. And so that vehicle works quite well. Talking about estate planning, a lot of people think that if they have a living trust and put their property in a living trust, that they've got asset protection. And that's not the case. A living trust will not provide you any asset protection, although it provides you a whole lot of other benefits.
Such as avoiding probate and
avoiding
those
probate.
things.
I have clients that have property in multiple states. If you die, you have to open a probate in every one of those states in order to transfer the property. By having a living trust and holding your real estate in that living trust, you avoid probate. And you also avoid the publicity of probate. It's pretty bad when, con artists can comb through probate files to find out, when the widow's getting all the money and when the 18-year-old is going to come into their inheritance. And, you want to avoid that, and a living trust can avoid that.
Mm-hmm. And you would, in general, suggest that most people would benefit from having a living trust in general, just that should not be the limit to their planning, right?
Exactly. It's a rare person that isn't going to benefit from a living trust for a number of reasons. And even if you use entities to hold your real estate, those entities should be in your living trust.
Mm-hmm.
So, the living trust and the entities and the real estate all work together, and so you need to work with somebody that understands each of those components and how they work together.
I run across people all the time who feel because they have their real estate and living trust that they have asset protection, and they have no idea that they're completely exposed.
Exactly.
A shame, and people certainly need to understand that. Talk a little bit about cost. What's typical cost? What's your firm charge for setting up some of these basic entities for the purpose of asset protection?
So the entities will run between $2,500 and $3,000, including filing fees, things like that. That's a pretty typical cost. Might be a little more than that if we're registering in 2 states, forming a Nevada or Delaware or whatever LLC, and then registering in California.
And you can form them in those different cities, right? Different states, I mean. Can you handle that for your clients?
We work with people that assist
Mm-hmm.
our clients, yes.
Okay.
And as far as a living trust goes, you're looking at a base fee of about $3,500 for a married couple, and it'll go up from there depending upon the type of planning that we're doing. You're probably looking in a ballpark of $3,500 to $5,000.
Pretty small price to pay for the kind of protection that you can get from it. So we're going to come back here with Nancy and wrap up with a couple last questions. And stay with us. We'll come back and you can find out how to contact Nancy to get more information.
For more information on today's program, visit RE360Radio.com. That's RE360Radio.com. For more information on today's program, visit RE360Radio.com. That's RE360Radio.com. Now, here's your host for Real Estate 360, Tom K. Wilson.
And welcome back. We're talking with Nancy Chillag, attorney, CPA, real estate broker, and investor, who's been talking to us about what kind of asset protection makes sense for your real estate and the different options. Nancy, you talked to us a little bit about the cost, and on the surface, some folks would say, "Oh, wow, that's a lot of money," but they've spent often many years or holding and accumulating real estate, and one problem, and it can be disastrous, and suddenly those costs seem like they're awfully small.
Exactly.
And it seems my sense is also that it's be very easy for someone to say, "Well, shoot, all right, so I got an LLC," and they go Google for it, and they pull up a standard form and go fill it out, and feel like, all right, I've done that, and I saved myself a little bit of money. What are some of the risks of someone doing that instead of coming in to talk to you?
Well, most of those forms are not geared towards the individual state laws. We have provisions that we put in all of our entities, the LLCs, the living trust, those types of things that provide additional protection that you never find in those form documents. For lack of a better word, the loopholes. So we've developed language that works in our entities to make sure that you have the maximum protection, and I just never see those in the online documents.
So the best thing for someone to do is to get an appointment with you and come in and talk about what they have, and you could discuss with them the different options they have and
exactly.
With that cost. And
mm-hmm.
So, Nancy, you want to give your contact information?
Sure. My phone number is 650-321-6796. And again, I'm in Menlo Park, and I service, clients all over the Bay Area. And my website is www.chillag.com. That's CHILLAG.com. And there's a lot of information on that website.
And you have don't you have a report also, Nancy?
I do. I have a report I developed called The 7 Lethal Real Estate Investment Mistakes That Can Cost You a Ton of Money and How to Avoid Them. And you can find that report at www.protectmyrealestate.com. It's a free download. So it goes into some of the stuff that we discussed today and some other items as well.
Well, great. Well, Nancy, thanks so much for your for being on the program today. Nancy, I can tell you is the real deal and a broader experience than most professionals have. And being an investor herself, I think that speaks a lot toward her expertise and ability to help you.
Thanks, Tom. It's been a pleasure being on your show.
Thank you. When we have on our next program, we're going to talk about how to plan your business and how to write a business plan. So I think that's something that will be of benefit to everyone. And if people have, any of you have questions that you want to direct my way, 408-867-1867. And my website is tomwilsonproperties.com. So we welcome you to come onto that website as well. There's a lot of information available to you. And we appreciate you being with us today.
You've been listening to Real Estate 360 on AM 1220 KDOW. For more information on today's program, visit RE360Radio.com. That's RE360Radio.com. AM 1220 KDOW.